I stood on the stage, the bright lights of the prestigious industry gala casting a warm glow on me. The crowd's applause felt like a tide of excitement, but the moment I heard my name announced, I couldn't help but feel like I was already drowning. I was holding the Crystal Award, my name etched in bold letters, glowing on the screen behind me. Helena, the host's voice rang out with mock enthusiasm. For outstanding strategic excellence and leadership. A round of applause, everyone, I smiled, but the feeling that had taken root in my stomach was anything but pride. I should have been elated. This was the moment I had worked years for. This was what I had dreamed of. Yet something gnawed at me as the CEO, Greg, approached the podium. He gave me a handshake, his eyes narrow behind a forced smile. "Congratulations, Helena," he said. "Your contribution to the company is truly remarkable." I felt my pulse quicken, the air growing heavy as he continued. I had done everything for Wexley. I had driven millions in revenue, created partnerships that elevated the company above its competitors, and pushed through barriers others had said were impossible. Yet there was a strange emptiness in his words, no genuine admiration, just duty. And then it happened. Greg cleared his throat, a shift in his tone signaling something off, but he paused, and the applause seemed to falter. As part of the leadership transition, it's time for new direction at Wexley. As a result, we regret to announce that Helena will be transitioning out of the company effective immediately. The words felt like a slap. I froze, my fingers tightening around the award as if I could hold on to the only thing that felt real in that moment. Behind me, the screen flickered, and the room, once filled with applause, had grown eerily silent. The words sank in. I had been fired, publicly in front of the entire room, just like that. It was as if my years of hard work, my loyalty, my leadership, meant nothing. Before I could respond, the video screen switched. The audience turned in unison, eyes wide as a video of Catherine, my mentee, played behind me. There she was, smiling, poised, the new strategic leader of Wexley. I could barely hear her voice over the rush of blood in my ears. The crowd's applause that once felt like validation now felt like a death knell. I wanted to look away. I wanted to shout, to say something, but I was frozen. The award in my hand felt like a mockery of everything I had built. As the video played, my name vanished from the screen, and the applause that once felt like recognition now felt like a dismissal. I stood there, still, holding my Crystal Award. I was no longer a part of Wexley. I was no longer the leader they once celebrated, and I was trapped in the sound of applause that had turned to mockery. I could feel the weight of the applause lingering in my chest as I made my way backstage. My heart was still pounding, the sound of my name echoing in my ears. I tried to breathe, to regain some sense of composure, but everything felt out of place, like I was moving through a fog. I wanted to believe this was some kind of mistake, that it wasn't real, but as I walked away from the stage, I reached into my purse, my fingers trembling slightly as I unlocked my phone. The first thing I noticed was the series of missed emails from the previous 2 days. I opened them one by one, but my stomach sank as I saw what they all had in common: access denied. I checked my work apps, and there it was. All of my systems were locked. My company email, my client records, even the most basic access to company files, gone. The realization hit me like a wave. This wasn't a mistake. This had been planned. I was already cut off. 2 days ago, before the public announcement, before the ceremony, before Greg's carefully timed betrayal. It wasn't just a coincidence. They'd orchestrated the entire thing. My firing, the video, Catherine replacing me. It had all been set up in advance. My access had been quietly revoked before the announcement, and I had walked into this gala, thinking it was a celebration, but it was really just the last act of a well-rehearsed show. I could feel the heat of anger starting to rise in my chest as I walked through the backstage hall, trying to collect myself. My footsteps echoed in the empty corridor. No one had followed me backstage. They didn't need to. They were all watching the new leader, Catherine. The applause was still ringing in my ears, but I was no longer part of it. They had moved on, and I had been discarded. I leaned against the cool concrete wall, trying to steady my breath as memories of the last few months rushed to the forefront of my mind. Greg, his constant presence, his subtle moves that had chipped away at my influence. Flashback. It had started with the meetings. One by one, I was gradually pulled out of critical discussions. At first, it seemed harmless. I figured I was just too busy to attend, that someone else was better suited for the task. But then, important decisions were made in my absence. Meetings I had once chaired now seemed irrelevant, like I was being phased out without a word. And then the projects. I remember the first time Greg handed over an important deal to someone else, someone junior. Catherine's been asking for more responsibility, he had said. I think she's ready for this. I didn't see it then, but I see it now. He was positioning her. Slowly, methodically, he took my place. Every little project, every client I had worked with for years, slipped through my fingers and into someone else's hands, Catherine's hands. I had earned millions for this company, had built relationships that stretched across continents, but Greg had always known it wasn't about my efforts. It was about his position. And the more he pushed me aside, the more Catherine, his golden child, took over. The irony stung. I had done everything for Wexley, sacrificed hours, days, months, and yet in the end, I was just a stepping stone for Greg to climb higher. Back to the present, I clicked on my phone again, scrolling through the messages and emails. They were expecting me to fold. I wanted to feel angry, to feel the rage that was bubbling up, but something else hit me. This was my fault. I had let it happen. I had ignored the signs, allowed Greg to whittle away at my control, convinced that my results spoke louder than politics. But I had been wrong. Greg had played me, and I had walked right into it, thinking my work ethic and loyalty would be enough, but loyalty meant nothing to him. It had never been about the work, it was about control. I straightened up, taking a deep breath as I looked back toward the stage. The sound of the applause seemed distant now, like it was for someone else. For Catherine, I had been duped, but I wasn't going to let them erase me like this. I walked toward the exit, the door closing behind me with a quiet click. No one noticed as I slipped out of the building, my thoughts already turning to the future. I stood outside the gala, the crisp night air sharp against my skin. My phone buzzed again, another email, another reminder that my systems had been locked out. I hadn't expected any real surprise, but now that it had all hit me, I had to focus. The walk to my car felt like moving through molasses, each step heavier than the last, but my mind was already running a mile a minute, or remembering those key moments from the past year. I had been preparing for this. Flashback. I had been working on 3 major partnerships at Wexley: Halbert Energy, North Star Logistics, and Adair Trust. Each of these deals was crucial, but my conversations with their leaders had been more than just about terms and agreements. I had embedded contingencies in each contract, hidden clauses meant to protect me, just in case. I had learned long ago that corporate loyalty was never guaranteed. I was always the one who worked tirelessly, pulling deals together, negotiating on behalf of the company. But what had Greg done for me lately? What had Wexley done for me other than take, and take? They used my ideas, my initiatives, and my leadership. But when it came time to secure my future, I knew I needed to cover my own back. With Halbert Energy, it had been a long and drawn-out process. The company was on the verge of expansion, a major acquisition on the horizon, and I was the one who helped make it happen. Over dinners, I had made sure to drop subtle suggestions about how important it was for their partnership with Wexley to stay strong, no matter who was at the helm. My words had been careful, calculated. I made sure their executives knew that if anything were to disrupt their relationship with Wexley, they would still have a viable path forward. I didn't mention my exit plans then, but I made sure they were prepared. I knew Halbert Energy valued continuity. North Star Logistics had been more straightforward. A logistics company growing at a breakneck pace, they were a perfect fit for Wexley's expansion strategy. But I had planted seeds in every conversation. They needed someone with foresight, someone who could deliver accountability. I'd convinced them that no matter what happened with my company's leadership, they could trust me to navigate the changing tides. I'd made sure my exit clauses were crystal clear in the fine print of our agreements. And then there was Adair Trust. This one had been trickier. Trust was more than just a commodity in the business world. It was personal. I had known Eleanor Green, their chairwoman, for years. She and I had always respected each other's drive, but when it came time to renew our strategic partnership, I knew how important it was to ensure my reputation stayed intact, regardless of Wexley's internal politics. During the contract negotiations, I had made sure they understood that if things went sideways with my role, there would be an immediate option for them to sever ties with Wexley, while still honoring the relationship with me personally. I hadn't shared my plans with anyone, not Greg, not even Catherine, but I had made sure those three companies understood that they would not be left in the lurch, no matter what happened with me at Wexley. As I sat in my car now, the weight of it all started to sink in. I had protected myself. Even as Wexley tried to erase me, I had ensured my reputation would remain intact. These partnerships weren't just business, they were my safety net, and I had built them with care. But the irony wasn't lost on me. I had earned millions for Wexley, had delivered success after success, only to be tossed aside like a disposable cog in a machine. But here, in this moment of clarity, I realized Greg wasn't just taking my position, he was trying to take my legacy. He thought he could replace me with Catherine. He thought that was all that mattered, his control. But what he failed to realize was that I wasn't just a leader. I was the one who held the keys to Wexley's future. I wasn't done, not by a long shot. And if tonight proved anything, it was that Greg had underestimated me. Back to the present, I pulled my phone out once more, dialing the number I hadn't called in weeks. Eleanor's voice came through, calm, steady. "Helena," she said, almost as if she knew. "I'm sorry to hear about what happened. I know you were integral to Wexley's success, and their treatment of you. It's inexcusable." I let out a breath, my fingers tightening around the steering wheel. "Thank you, Eleanor," I replied quietly, "but there's no need for apologies. What's done is done." "No," she said, her voice firm. "This is about the future, Helena, and we, Adair Trust, are prepared to move forward with you. Whatever happens with Wexley, we want to work with you directly. Not as part of the company, but with you and your vision. Nova True Partners." I felt the weight lift from my chest, the validation I hadn't known I needed. "Thank you," I whispered. "I won't let you down." Her response was simple, but powerful. "You already haven't. We'll be in touch soon. But know this, Adair Trust is with you." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the words settle. This was more than just a business partnership. It was a recognition of my value outside of the shadow of Wexley. It was a sign that my next step, no matter how challenging it seemed, was going to be a path paved with trust and respect. And now, with Adair Trust in my corner, I knew I had everything I needed to build something even greater. The weight of the ceremony still hung heavy on me as I walked through the door of my apartment. It had been hours since the gala, and the house was eerily quiet, just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of traffic outside. I kicked off my heels with a heavy sigh and let them fall to the floor. I had barely taken a step further when I stopped, my gaze falling on the crystal award sitting in my hand. The light from the living room reflected off its polished surface, making it gleam. I set it down on the counter with a soft thud. That thing, that trophy, was supposed to be a symbol of my achievements, my hard work, my leadership. Now it felt like a cruel joke. It had been handed to me as an award, but in reality, it had been handed to me as my final reminder that Wexley had discarded me. I walked over to my desk, the one place in the apartment where I'd always been able to think clearly. I opened the drawer, and there it was, buried beneath old files, invoices, and documents. My secret project, Nova True Partners. For months, I had been quietly building this consulting firm. It had been my safety net, my escape plan. I had created a space for myself outside of Wexley, outside of Greg's grasp. While I was still giving my all to Wexley, I knew something had to give. I knew this day was coming. I flipped open the drawer and ran my fingers over the papers that represented everything I had worked on outside of Wexley. The company was operational, legally sound, and ready for launch. The logo had been finalized weeks ago, a simple, elegant design that captured the essence of what I wanted to build: trust, clarity, and integrity. Nova True wasn't just a name. It was my vision, my mission. I sat down in the chair and took a deep breath. This wasn't a knee-jerk reaction to the betrayal. This wasn't just about revenge on Greg or Wexley. This was about me, about my vision for the future. A future where I wasn't defined by corporate politics or manipulation. A future where I made the rules. The flicker of a smile passed over my lips as I pulled up the account I had set aside for the business. There were just a few more steps left to go before everything was officially live. I pressed the button, flipping the switch to make Nova True Partners public. It felt like a weight lifting off my chest, like I was finally taking control of my future. In the quiet of my apartment, I sat back, watching the screen as it reflected the changes I had just made. It wasn't just about leaving Wexley behind. It was about forging a path forward. A path where I could stand tall and be recognized for the value I brought to my clients, not as a pawn, not as a cog in someone else's machine, but as a leader in my own right. I looked at the award on the counter. My mind was a whirlwind of emotion, but there was a sense of calm settling over me. This was the beginning of something real, something that was mine, built by my own hands, on my own terms. I couldn't change the past. I couldn't undo the betrayal, but I could rebuild. And rebuild I would. I ran my fingers over the sleek surface of my desk, feeling the weight of the decisions I had made over the past few months. Everything had led to this moment. The people who truly mattered to me had always understood what I was capable of. Now I would show the world. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning of the future I had always wanted. I glanced back at the Crystal Award, the only thing left of Wexley in my apartment. It was a hollow reminder now, a piece of glass with no meaning attached to it. I wasn't interested in being part of the game anymore. I was going to play by my own rules from here on out. And as I sat back in my chair, the hum of my phone broke the silence. It was a message from Eleanor Green, the chairwoman of Adair Trust. Helena, I've been hearing what's going on, and I want you to know, we stand by you. We've always valued your leadership. When you're ready, we'd like to move forward with Nova True Partners. You've earned our trust, and we're ready to move with you. A slow smile spread across my face. My first client. This wasn't just about business. It was about recognition, and this was my moment. The weight of the previous night still hung in the air as I woke up to a quiet, empty apartment. The only sound was the soft hum of my coffee machine as it brewed. I hadn't slept much. The events of the gala kept replaying in my mind. The award, the announcement, the video. It all felt like a cruel fever dream, but the one thing I couldn't shake was the sense of relief that followed the chaos. I wasn't trapped anymore. Not in Wexley, not in their web of manipulation. My phone buzzed on the counter, breaking the silence. I glanced at it, seeing an unfamiliar number. It wasn't unusual for clients to reach out, but something about this call made me hesitate for a moment before I answered. Helena, a calm voice greeted me. It's Eleanor Green. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. I froze. Eleanor, chairwoman of Adair Trust. She was one of my most loyal clients, and someone who had always shown me respect, even when others had ignored my contributions. No, I replied, forcing myself to sound composed. Not at all. What can I do for you, Eleanor? There was a long pause before she spoke again, her voice steady but tinged with something I couldn't quite place. I saw what happened last night, she said softly. What they did to you. It was disgraceful. Wexley's treatment of you was completely unjustified, and I want you to know, we, Adair Trust, are with you. You've done more for us than anyone at that company, and I want you to know that we're ready to move forward with you. We'll be your first client at Nova True Partners. My heart skipped a beat. I had known Eleanor for years, but hearing those words, hearing her not only acknowledge my worth, but actively support me in this new venture, was more than I had dared to hope for. Eleanor, My voice faltered, and I cleared my throat. I didn't expect this, but I'm grateful. Truly. She chuckled softly, and I could picture the smile in her voice. You've earned it, Helena, and you know, we always trusted you. It was never about Wexley. It was always about the person you are and the value you bring. Wexley's loss is Nova True's gain, and we'll be there to help you build it up. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt the weight in my chest lift. It wasn't just business, it was validation, it was recognition. My efforts, my vision for the future, were finally being appreciated by the people who mattered. Not because of some corporate agenda, not because of a title or a salary, but because I had stayed true to who I was and to the people I valued. "Thank you, Eleanor," I whispered, a lump in my throat. "I promise you won't regret this." "I know I won't," she replied, with quiet conviction. "I'll have my team reach out to you soon, and we can discuss the specifics. In the meantime, take a breath, Helena. You've earned this." I smiled. The first genuine smile in what felt like days. "I'll be ready. Thank you again." We exchanged pleasantries before hanging up, and as I sat back in my chair, the rush of emotions hit me all at once. This was why I had done it all, not just for the contracts or the numbers, but for the relationships that had sustained me, those that had seen my worth even when others hadn't. I glanced at my phone again, and there it was. A message from Raymond Cho at North Star Logistics. Another key partner. I had been working with him for years, and I knew his company valued integrity above all else. But would they support me now that I was no longer with Wexley? I opened the message, my pulse quickening as I read, "Helena, I heard the news, and I wanted to let you know North Star will continue to work with you. I've always respected your leadership, and this won't change that. Let's talk soon. Raymond." I leaned back in my chair, my eyes closing for a moment as I took it all in. 2 major clients, Adair Trust, North Star Logistics, both standing with me, ready to move forward. The foundation of Nova True Partners was already stronger than I had ever expected. In the span of a single day, everything had changed, but as I sat there, staring at the phone in my hand, I realized that I had control now. I had a future ahead of me, one that I had built quietly, steadily, and on my own terms. I stood up, walking over to my desk where the plans for Nova True Partners were neatly arranged. The firm I had founded as insurance was now my reality, and the people who truly mattered in my career had just pledged their support. I hadn't been abandoned, I had been set free, and with that, I made my first official move, drafting the plans for the next chapter. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong, it was about creating something that would stand on its own. It was time to build Nova True Partners into the legacy I knew it could be. The first few days after the gala felt like a whirlwind of quiet chaos. Nova True Partners was officially live, and I was starting to settle into the rhythm of running my own business. My days were filled with meetings with potential clients, setting up operational structures, and organizing legal documents. The work was demanding, but it was my own. It felt right. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every phone call, every email, felt like it could be another reminder of the life I had left behind. Or worse, an attempt to pull me back in. Then, late one night, after finishing up a particularly tough meeting with a prospective partner, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Greg. The subject line read, "A proposal for reconciliation." My stomach turned as I clicked open the message. I had already suspected that Greg wouldn't just let me go quietly, but seeing his name in my inbox, along with that subject line, felt like a cruel joke. The email was long and polished, but the message was clear. He wanted me back. "Helena," it began, his familiar formal tone grating against the calm I had worked so hard to establish. "I've taken some time to reflect on recent events and the way things unfolded. I acknowledge the manner in which we parted ways was not ideal, and I regret the way it was handled. With that said, I'd like to propose a new opportunity for you. We've been considering a leadership overhaul, and I believe your experience could be invaluable in this next phase for Wexley. I would like to offer you a high-ranking position within the company, one that acknowledges your immense contribution to Wexley's success. Let's work together to rebuild." The audacity of it took my breath away. His words seemed to drip with sincerity, but I knew better. This wasn't an apology. It was a power play. He had miscalculated, and now he wanted to reel me back in. As I sat there staring at the email, I knew what I had to do. This wasn't an olive branch. It wasn't an attempt to repair our professional relationship. It was a calculated move to pull me back under his control. He knew that the company was hemorrhaging without me at the helm, and he wanted to use my reputation, my success, to salvage his own. He thought I would come crawling back, but I wasn't going to let him think he could pull the strings this time. Not after everything that had happened. I had built something on my own, something that didn't rely on Wexley, on Greg, or on any corporate politics. I wasn't going back into that cage. Not now, not ever. I closed the email, my fingers moving swiftly over my keyboard. The decision was easy. I didn't need Greg. I didn't need Wexley. I had Nova True, and that was more than enough. With a quick swipe of my hand, I set up an auto-response on my email. It was direct, professional, and most importantly, final. Thank you for your message. I have decided to move forward with my own business ventures. Please note that I will not be engaging in further discussions regarding a return to Wexley. Best regards, Helena. I clicked send. I felt a weight lift off my chest. This was the moment I had to seal the door on my past. I couldn't let Greg or Wexley drag me back into their drama. There was no room for apologies or second chances. No amount of corporate titles or high-ranking positions would change the fact that Greg had shown his true colors. This wasn't about reconciliation. This was about control. The next morning, I awoke to more emails, mostly from potential clients reaching out with interest in Nova True Partners. I was starting to see the fruits of my labor take shape. The quiet foundation I had built was becoming something real. But then, in the midst of everything, I saw a notification pop up. Another email from Greg. The subject line now read, "We need to talk." I stared at the message for a moment. The phone buzzed again, this time with a text from my assistant, asking if I wanted to schedule a meeting with a new prospective client. The contrast between the two was striking. One was a calculated attempt to pull me back into an old life. The other was about moving forward, building a new life on my terms. I let out a long, controlled breath. I wasn't about to let Greg dictate my future, not anymore. I deleted his email without opening it. Then I silenced the phone notifications for the day. I had work to do, real work, work that mattered. I opened the door to my office and looked around. This was it, the start of something new, something I had built with my own hands, and it would succeed, not because of Wexley, but because of me. The quiet click of my keyboard was the only sound in the room as I reviewed the final draft of a contract with a new client. Things were moving forward smoothly with Nova True Partners. Clients were steadily coming on board, and I was gaining momentum in the business world. It was hard to imagine that just a few weeks ago, I had stood frozen on stage at that gala, humiliated and betrayed. Now the only thing that mattered was building something real, something mine. But then, in the middle of reviewing a proposal, I got a notification from my inbox. The subject line caught my attention. The Quiet Architect. A story you need to read. Curious, I clicked open the email from Maya Hensley, a journalist I had worked with years ago on a few corporate pieces. She was always sharp, insightful, and had a way of uncovering truths that others wouldn't dare. I wasn't sure what she wanted with me now, but I opened the email. Dear Helena, I hope this message finds you well. I've been following the developments surrounding your departure from Wexley and the launch of Nova True Partners. After hearing rumors and speaking with several sources close to the situation, I wanted to give you an opportunity to share your story. I believe your decision to build Nova True wasn't just a reaction to what happened at Wexley, but a deliberate, thoughtful strategy built months in advance. I've written a piece called The Quiet Architect, which I believe will shed light on your planning and vision for the future. I understand this might be a sensitive subject, but I think the world deserves to know the truth. Best regards, Maya Hensley. I sat back in my chair, processing what I had just read. The Quiet Architect. Maya had pieced together the story. She knew about my careful planning for Nova True, the strategic contingency clauses, and how I had protected my future before Greg had made his move. She knew how I had built something in the background while still working within Wexley's walls. It was a quiet kind of revenge, not fueled by anger, but by foresight. I had seen it coming, and now my story was about to be shared with the world. I clicked on the link in the email, and the article appeared on the screen, The Quiet Architect, How Helena Built Nova. True Partners in Secret. When Helena stood on stage last week to receive an award for strategic excellence, no one in the audience expected the bombshell that would follow. CEO Greg announced her removal from the company she had dedicated years of her life to, revealing a leadership transition orchestrated in the shadows. But what few knew was that Helena had already planned her exit. Sources close to the situation have confirmed that while Wexley's board was preparing to make their move, Helena had been quietly building her consulting firm, Nova True Partners, for months. With 3 major contracts secured, Halbert Energy, North Star Logistics, and Adair Trust, Helena had ensured her reputation and future were protected, regardless of what happened within the company. Her foresight and quiet preparation have not only allowed her to navigate Wexley's betrayal, but to build a business rooted in trust, ethics, and accountability. Nova True Partners is now positioned to disrupt the business consulting world, offering clients more than just results. They promise accountability and transparency, values that have been sorely lacking at corporate powerhouses like Wexley. The article was honest, revealing not just the facts, but the bigger picture. It showed that I hadn't been a passive victim. I had seen through the facade of corporate politics and had taken steps to secure my future long before Wexley could take it from me. It wasn't just a story of betrayal. It was a story of strength, resilience, and the power of foresight. I could feel a shift inside me as I read Maya's words. This was vindication. It wasn't just that I had built something successful on my own. It was that the truth about my actions, about my planning, was finally out in the open. Greg and the board thought they could erase me. They thought they could silence me. But here I was, with my own business, my own future, and the truth on my side. The phone buzzed with a new notification, and this time it was from Greg. I almost didn't want to open it, but curiosity won over. Helena, the email began. I saw the article that was just published. I can't say I'm surprised, but I want to make one thing clear. What happened was business, not personal. I'm sorry it ended this way, but I hope you can understand that it was necessary for the company's future. If you're open to it, I'd still like to discuss the possibility of you returning to Wexley. Let's find a way to move forward together. I read the email several times, my jaw tightening. This was exactly what I had expected. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't offering an apology. He was trying to pull me back in. Still trying to control the narrative, still trying to put me under his thumb, I deleted it without responding. I didn't need him. I didn't need Wexley. I looked back at the article. The words, "The Quiet Architect," echoed in my mind. The world was starting to see me for who I really was. Not the woman Greg had tried to replace, but the woman who had built a future on her own terms. And that felt more powerful than any corporate position, any fancy title, or any boardroom meeting. As the day wore on, more messages poured in. Clients, colleagues, and even former employees reached out. Congratulating me, my inbox was flooded. Not just with business opportunities, but with respect. For the first time in what felt like forever, I smiled. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving, and I was free. 6 months had passed since that humiliating moment at the gala, and Nova True Partners was no longer just a safety net. It was my business. It had grown, slowly but steadily, and now it was time for its official public launch. I stood in the industrial warehouse that had been transformed into an elegant, warm event space. The exposed beams and raw concrete walls had been carefully juxtaposed with sleek furniture and soft lighting, creating a sense of both modernity and authenticity. The transformation mirrored my own. What had once been a dark, uncertain time now radiated hope and possibility. Clients and colleagues were arriving, some of the most respected names in the industry. Eleanor Green from Adair Trust, Raymond Cho from North Star Logistics, Marjorie Daniels, a rising star in the financial sector who had quickly become one of Nova True's earliest supporters. I was surrounded by people who had chosen to invest in me, who believed in what I stood for, not just as a professional, but as someone who valued integrity above all else. I looked around at the venue, taking in the polished floors and the beautiful tables adorned with simple but elegant centerpieces. There was a quiet energy in the room. It wasn't just about a new business or new opportunities. It was about honoring the values I had built this company on: transparency, loyalty, and ethics. As I prepared to speak, I felt a calmness wash over me. The past, the betrayal, the humiliation, It had all led to this moment. This was my victory, not in the loud, brash way I might have once imagined, but in a quieter, more deliberate way. The people here weren't clapping because they had to. They were clapping because they respected what I had built. My assistant gave me a nod from across the room, signaling that it was time. I walked toward the stage, my heels clicking softly on the floor. There was no spotlight shining down on me, no grand fanfare, just a few focused lights and a microphone waiting for me to speak. I took a deep breath and stepped up to the podium. "Thank you all for being here," I began, my voice steady. "It's incredible to see so many faces I've come to trust and respect, gathered together to celebrate not just a business, but a mission." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle in the room. When I started Nova True Partners, it wasn't just about building a company, it was about building a legacy. A legacy grounded in something more than profits or quarterly goals. It was about restoring ethics and clarity in the business world. A world where people don't just promise results, but take accountability for them. Where companies don't just focus on growth, but on building real, lasting relationships. Relationships that are based on trust, not manipulation, not corporate games. I could see Eleanor and Raymond nodding in the audience. Marjorie had a proud smile on her face. The support in the room was palpable, and I could feel it reinforcing my message. For too long, the corporate world has been about power plays and false promises. Wexley was just one example. But the problem runs deep, I continued. I've seen what happens when you put profit above everything else. I've seen how it erodes trust, how it silences voices, and how it destroys the very relationships that should be the foundation of any company. I took another breath. But this is not a story of revenge. It's not a story about getting back at anyone. This is about building something better. This is about honoring the people who have always stood by me, and who believed in what I was capable of, long before I knew it myself. A quiet murmur of agreement spread through the room. "I couldn't have done this alone," I added. "I have the best clients, the most supportive partners, and the most incredible team. You've all been part of this journey, and together we are going to redefine what it means to be a true leader in business." I looked over at Eleanor, Raymond, and Marguerite. "I couldn't be more grateful for the trust you've placed in me, for the belief you've shown in Nova True Partners. I promise you, we will not disappoint. Together, we will build something that stands for more than just profits. We will build a company that stands for what's right." I smiled as the room filled with applause, but this time it wasn't forced. It wasn't the kind of applause I had gotten at Wexley, when people clapped out of obligation or pressure. This applause was genuine. It was for the vision, for the future we were about to create together. It was a celebration. As I looked out at the crowd, a sense of calm certainty washed over me. This was my moment. Not in the dramatic, vindictive sense I had once imagined, but in the quiet, steady acknowledgement of what I had built. It was a quiet, powerful victory. The kind of victory that wasn't born out of spite, but out of hard work, integrity, and trust. And for the first time in years, I felt truly at peace with the path ahead. It had been several months since the public launch of Nova True Partners, and I was finally starting to feel the steady rhythm of my new life. The business was thriving, clients came steadily, many of them former contacts I had earned the trust of during my years at Wexley, now placing their faith in my vision for integrity in business. Every new partnership, every handshake, reminded me that this was my path to walk, free from the constraints of the corporate world. One quiet afternoon, as I worked through another round of contract reviews, a letter arrived at my door. I set aside the papers in front of me and opened the envelope. It was from North Star Logistics, one of the key clients I had been carefully nurturing since the beginning of Nova True. I unfolded the letter slowly, my heart beating just a bit faster. "Helena," it began, "we are writing to confirm that North Star Logistics will continue our partnership with Nova True Partners under your leadership. The trust and transparency you've demonstrated in our dealings over the years has never gone unnoticed. We look forward to the opportunity to collaborate further as you continue to build something extraordinary." I exhaled slowly, a quiet smile spreading across my face. It wasn't just business, it was validation. Genuine validation. But then, as I read on, my eyes caught something else. "Enclosed is a small token of appreciation for your unwavering commitment." We hope it serves as a reminder of the trust we place in you. I set the letter down and looked inside the envelope, my fingers brushing against the smooth velvet surface of a small box. I opened it carefully, not knowing what to expect. Inside, nestled on a bed of soft fabric, was a watch, a sleek, elegant timepiece, one I recognized instantly. It was the same one I had once given to Raymond Cho when we had celebrated the first major deal we had secured together years ago, back when I was still at Wexley. I had chosen it because it symbolized something important: time. Time spent building relationships, time spent on building trust, and now, here it was again. This time with an inscription engraved on the back. You gave us time, now we return it. The words hit me like a wave. This wasn't just a gift, this was a statement. It was a recognition of everything I had given over the years, my time, my expertise, my integrity. And now, this was them honoring me in return. I stared at the watch for a long moment, my mind spinning as the significance of this gesture settled into my chest. It wasn't just North Star continuing to work with me. It was their recognition of the loyalty I had shown them, and the loyalty they now returned. A mutual respect, something I had never felt at Wexley. The irony wasn't lost on me. Wexley had tried to erase me, but here I was, surrounded by the people who mattered most, those who understood what true loyalty meant. I took the watch in my hands, feeling its weight, and for the first time since leaving Wexley, I felt a quiet peace. This was more than just a new business venture. It was a testament to the quiet power I had built, grounded in authenticity and loyalty, values that had been overlooked at Wexley, but had become the very foundation of Nova True. The room was quiet except for the soft ticking of the watch, and in that moment, I knew this was more than just a new chapter. It was the confirmation that I had made the right choice, that, even in the silence, I had won. I set the watch down, a smile still lingering on my lips. My phone buzzed, and I saw a message from Eleanor. Raymond just called to tell me about the watch. I've got to say, it's not just a gift. It's a reminder of how far you've come, Helena, and how much more you'll accomplish. I typed back quickly. It's a reminder of what's possible when you build something based on trust, and with clients like you, I know it's just the beginning. The weight of everything that had led me to this moment, the pain, the betrayal, the quiet preparation, felt like it had all led me here, to this simple but powerful truth. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. And as the watch ticked steadily beside me, I knew that my time had come.